Everyone, welcome to another 10-minute interview. My name's Rachel, I'm part of the Twinkl Home Ed team, and I have the great privilege of being able to interview lots of different types of home educators, some from literally down the road from me and some from across the ocean. And that's what's happening today. We're interviewing Julie Bogart, who lives in America, so that's why there was a little bit of a mix-up with the time differences, but hopefully this will all work out. So yeah, we're going to be interviewing Julie. A lot of you will know her as Julie Bravewriter or the Brave Learner, and for a lot of us in the UK, the first book we read about home education was her book. So I know that she's been a big influence on a lot of you. So we're going to get her on very soon and we're going to do our live. Now, if you haven't been here before, it's just 10 minutes. I even have a timer to see that, make sure we don't go overboard. So you can watch the whole thing and it's not going to take up much of your time, but I guarantee that it's going to be great. So definitely stick around. So I'm going to invite Julie on very soon, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll calculate the time difference right this time and we'll be able to chat to her. Hang on, let's see if we can get this. Don't seem to be able to find her on there. Let's try again. Right, give me a sec. Let's see if I can figure this out.
Hello, here I am.
I was panicking so much about the time differences, so
It worked out perfectly. I'm always trying to keep mine straight up and down. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How's your day been?
Good, really good. Yeah, nice to
Brilliant.
see you.
Yeah, and you too. So I've already given a little bit of an introduction already, but most people
Great.
will know you. And when we shared about that we were interviewing you, people were very, very excited.
Great.
So I know that there's going to be a lot of people watching. So what we normally do is I start a timer and we just do 10 minutes because we know that
Perfect.
home educators, they're very busy, and so we know we're not taking up much of their time. But if we do go over it, it's not a big deal. So we'll get the small talk out the way first, and then I'll press the timer if that's all right.
Perfect.
Great. So just tell us, for those that don't know, who you are, who you home educated, and what you do now.
Great. Yeah, so my name is Julie Bogart. I have 5 adult kids. I homeschooled them for 17 years. They're all, gainfully employed, most of them married. I've got grandkids now, so all of that's good. I run Bravewriter. It's a company that teaches writing and language arts and homeschooling advice to parents around the globe. And we've been at it for 22 years, 100,000 families, 191 countries. And we've expanded to include things like history and science and even math this year for the first time. We've got some of that going on as well. We believe every subject benefits from writing, and we see writing as the key to a great education. So that's it. Yeah, and then I've written a couple of books too.
Yeah, just a few books. Yeah, I didn't realize it had been 22 years.
Yeah, I started in January 2000. So yeah, isn't that wild?
That's amazing. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to start the timer now. There's no
Great.
pressure.
Let's
Here
go.
we go. I've got my old school timer. 10 minutes on the clock. So your last book was Raising Critical Thinkers. And have you got it? Brilliant. Because I only got a digital copy and I couldn't hold it up. So one of the standout kind of pithy things that I really found helpful was for kids to know who's telling the story. So I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit and how that might outwork itself in the kind of day-to-day of home ed.
Yeah. So one of the automatic assumptions we all make is that when someone tells us the story, that they have the authority to tell us the truth. And one of the key dispositions to have as a critical thinker is to not only hear who's telling the story, but to also ask, well, who isn't telling the story? Whose version of this event is not included in this version? So if we hear like the omniscient narrator in most stories sides with a main character. But do we know how that story went down for other characters? A great example of a book that really does this well is Wonder by Patricia Palacio. Every chapter is about the very same story, but it is told through each different character's experience. So there's an overlapping consensus of content, but the understanding of what that content means shifts based on the experience of the character. When we're talking about critical thinking, then, understanding who's telling the story and whose story isn't being told is essential.
Yeah, and I think especially even just thinking about like the 4th of July just gone in America, and so many different things where we just, especially when we've been brought up with one side of the story,
yes,
figure it out for our kids, it can feel really tricky to do that.
Truly.
Do you have any practical tips of what we can maybe do as home educators to learn ourselves, and then how we can just make that just part of our narrative with our kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that is helpful to do is if you watch a lot of movies, we watched a lot of Disney movies, but it doesn't matter what the movie is, with your kids, you can do this in 2 hours. Have a remote control, and at the beginning of the movie, maybe after the opening action sequence, usually there's action at the start of a movie to hook our attention, pause it and ask your kids, now, who are we rooting for? And they'll immediately know. It's like the movie tells you who to root for. And then you ask, well, why are you rooting for them? What do you know about their story? What makes them the sympathetic character already? See if you can find out. Ask them who we're rooting against. And do we know why we should be rooting against them? So in like a typical action movie, there might be a chase scene at the beginning. And we tend to root for the person being chased and root against the person chasing. But the story might actually be that a convict is escaping and, you know, the authorities are chasing him, and that might be the better person to root for. So the questions we're going to ask during this movie is the beginning of helping that. We can ask about the impact of music. So you hear music and you say, okay, what mood did that music put you in? Are we suspicious? Are we excited? Do we expect good things or sad things? This scene is raining. Do we think the rain is supposed to make us feel good or make us feel bad? Why? When we get to the climax, can we pause it and ask, what's supposed to happen at this point? What do we hope will happen so the story will be over? What will we be devastated would happen? Like if this was the outcome, what would devastate us and make us think this is a terrible movie? How do we know these things? Why do we feel these things? That's a way of doing this in your natural life. It's just asking those sort of investigative questions that surface assumptions that we're making that we're not consciously aware of.
Yeah, that's really powerful, because I can even think of episodes of Paw Patrol that my kids
yes,
where I'm like, yes, we could do that with, and
totally.
Then, obviously, it then just becomes a natural thought process kind of triggering our mind.
Exactly, you got it.
Thank you. So for in the UK, a lot of home educators are fairly new. It's not the kind of established culture is in America, especially because of the pandemic. It's just like it's blossomed with lots of other home educators. But I think one thing we find is that we get nervous because we want things that we can measure, and we want like the checklist to tick off, and we want to be able to like we follow the school subjects. And especially in the UK, they're thinking of bringing in a lot more monitoring of home educators. So that kind of increases the fear factor. So I just wondered if you could talk, like speak into that, maybe give us some encouragement for when we are feeling like fearful, because critical thinking isn't as easy to measure, and it can't just be like ticked off as easily as like knowing your times tables. So could you help us out, I think, and give us a bit of confidence with that?
Yeah, so there are a couple of thoughts I had. One is, first, start by changing your checklist. Like, give yourself credit for things that are actually happening. So go ahead and put on the checklist, my child was able to identify who was telling the story. Put on the checklist, enjoyed the read aloud. Why does that matter? It matters because if they are gaining a love or connection to reading, that will live with them for the rest of their lives. That's more valuable than an A or a measurement. Another one, took time off. to let the ideas congeal, right? So you're teaching multiplication, it's starting to feel onerous. So you took 3 or 4 days off so they'd have time to let that percolate, and then you return to it. Give yourself credit for all the things you're doing, not just the things that show up on this sort of schoolish list. Now, about that list, and it's important, you can notice that academics, educators use a variety of language pieces that are really annoying. Things like, master the times tables, understands grammar, and they'll use words that are even sort of unfamiliar to you. So what I recommend is looking at the scope and sequence, looking at the language that your school uses, and then taking what your kids are learning at home and just translating, being bilingual, putting it into that language for whoever's doing the monitoring. In Growing Brave Writers, my brand new book, new manual, I actually give you help with that. I give you a word bank of all the skills, and then I give you a sample narrative sketch of how to incorporate those into sentences that demonstrate what your child just learned using that activity. And I think that will provide a really good role model.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I used to be a teacher, and you do just learn to like use the language when the inspectors come. You kind of you play the game a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And it is a language game, but it's also, I think for parents, they just haven't been trained in that language. So if you see it more like going from London to Paris and knowing what words to use when you're in Paris, you'll feel better. You won't see it as cheating. You'll see it as translating.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. We have 2 minutes left.
Okay.
So you said you've got this manual coming. Is that coming out soon?
Yes. So it will be published on July 15th. It's called Growing Brave Writers. And but it's open for pre-sale right now. I'm doing a training on the day of publication on July 15th to help people implement it. It is all completely rewritten. It's really easy to use. There is an amazing section on revision, and I think you're all going to love it.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. Have you been to England? I'm curious.
I have. I've been to London, yes, and then I've also been to I'm gonna miss the name of it now. It's outside of London, and I did a conference there. It was really lovely. But yes, so I've been to England twice, and I enjoyed it both times.
You'll have to come to
Excuse
the north.
me?
Have you been to the
No,
north?
I've never been to the north. No, I would love to. Yeah, I would love to.
You need to come up to the north, definitely. I think people would love to hear you talk in person as well.
Oh,
thank you so much for coming on. I know for a lot of people, they got the kids in bed early so that they could watch this. And it's just sometimes just a lovely way to end the day, is just to chat to someone who's taken their kids through it and has the kind of calm confidence that we're going to be okay. So thank you so much for doing that for us.
Yeah, you absolutely are welcome. But I also just want to say, I know that you can do this. We've seen millions of families successfully home educate. And I think it's so important to remind everyone of that. I do have a podcast. It's called Brave Writer, and it's active right now. Oh, Scrapbooks and Wellies. I know her too. I visited her. That was amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. You have a lovely community.
Thank you. I'll direct people over to you so they can find out more about the session you're doing soon. But thank you so much. Have a brilliant rest of the day and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.